It's almost like there was a time when there was no such thing really as a designer. It was just all programmers. In fact, there was a time when it was just programmers doing art, back in like the early 80s. Now we're entering into a time when something that used to be traditionally a design role is kind of being broken out into its own thing. So I literally do nothing now except work on story, dialogue, writing, actors, stuff like that. My name is Matthew Colville. I'm the lead story designer, writer, and I'm in charge of the story, I'm in charge of the plot, I'm in charge of all the characters, I'm in charge of coordinating all the writing, scheduling, budgeting, and all that stuff. I was a designer. I started off as a designer on the project on Mercs 1, and we had a screenwriter that LucasArts gave us, and he did drafts of all of our mission briefings and submitted them to the lead designer, and the lead designer was really busy, and he's like, I don't have time to go over all this stuff. So he sent it out to the team and said, can you guys read over this and let me know what you think? And I had come from the pen and paper RPG industry where I had been managing lots of writers and writing. And so I went through it with, a red pen and destroyed it and said, we need to redo all this stuff. And they said, fine, you do it. And since then I've been in charge of the story and the plot and the characters. So I was involved with Mercs 2 from the very beginning, sitting down with the director and the lead designer and the art director. Where are we going to put the game? What's it going to be about? Who's our main bad guy? Stuff like that. All the characters on Mercs 1 already existed by the time I came on board. And we kind of reskinned them for Mercs 2. Chris, Jen, and Matthias in the first game are they don't have a whole lot of dialogue, and you don't learn a lot about them, and now they have to shoulder the burden of telling a story. And that means they need to be slightly more developed characters. This isn't going to be like a Chekhov play. It's Mercenaries, right? It's this over-the-top 80s action movie game. But everything else, it was the director's idea to set the game in Venezuela because we thought it was really a great location visually to put a game in. Plus, the fact that Venezuela has a lot of oil and oil is on people's minds right now, we thought was pretty timely. Ripped from the headlines, you might say. But the bad guy, his henchmen, the nature of the conflict was all the stuff that I headed up and worked on, in collaboration with everybody else. It was a long, involved process. It took a lot longer than it should have to figure out what the story for Mercenaries 2 was going to be, and that's because we have many people from many disparate backgrounds getting together and working it out. And there's many things from earlier iterations of the story that I miss, but I miss because we cut them or changed the story. But I'm pretty happy with what we have now. I think the story we have now is solid. It's going to take you from the beginning of the game to the end of the game, and the player should be able to, at any given point, understand why am I doing what I'm doing. In the first game, the story was pretty ephemeral in that it was easy to play through the game and not have any idea what the hell was going on. And so there was no context for a lot of your actions. And one of the really difficult things we decided to do for Mercs 2 was make sure that all the mission design was informed by the story and the story was informed by the mission design. So that's what the lead designer and I do, is we make sure that those two elements play well together. That's ultimately the goal. All we're trying to do, we're not a story-based game. The game is one man taking on armies and blowing up buildings and hijacking helicopters and having fun while you're doing it. The goal of story on this project is just to provide context for that. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Because without the context, especially with a game like Mercenaries, it becomes a toy. It's just something you play around with for a little while and then you put down. The story is the thing that pulls you through and gets you from one moment to the next. We've gone through several iterations of the story. We went from having the 3 heroes to 5 heroes to 1 hero. We've gone through at least 2 different bad guys. There's stuff that we would like to do that we can't because it's not, even though it makes sense for the story, it doesn't make sense for Mercs gameplay. So if what makes sense for the story does not support that, then we have to change the story. In other senses, it makes things easier, right? Because if we want to know, how do we resolve this conflict? Like, if we have one of the bosses in the game, the main bad guy's henchman, if we want to decide, well, where is the final confrontation between the hero and this guy going to take place? We know it's got to be someplace that gets destroyed, someplace big. So we say, hey, let's put it on the oil rig, which is this huge, massive structure with all sorts of moving parts and stuff that you get to blow up. So that makes our lives easier because we can kind of look around in the world that we're building and say, where's the best place to put this final confrontation? I don't know how many other companies have somebody like me. Usually my job is done either by the lead designer or the director or some combination thereof. As a team kind of working together. And then once they've got the plot worked out and they know who all the characters are and what happens when, then they hand it off to a writer who is often a hired gun. somebody they bring on just to write the dialogue. I think that the need is only now emerging in the industry. Not all. I mean, not all games. You know, I'm playing a lot of Elite Beat Agents right now on my DS, and that's not a game that needs an elaborate story. But as many games become more of an experience, they require greater characterization, better characterization, more attention paid to story and stuff like that. So as we are moving into that phase, especially with the next gen games, we're going to see more people like me doing what I'm doing. My first video game was Mercs 1. My second video game was Mercs 2. I'm pretty sure I know what my third video game is going to be.